The title of our sermon time together is an explanation regarding our gospel lesson of the parable, which we call the parable of the Prodigal Son, which you just heard read. Is the father was one who had these two sons. He divided the inheritance. The younger son went out and squandered it. The older son stayed and worked very hard in the fields. The younger son comes back, and the father welcomes him very much so with an extraordinary celebration. And I use the words from a man that we absolutely know the name of, Winston Churchill, who it is attributed to having given one of the shortest commencement addresses in history when he was invited by President Harry Truman to give the address at Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri. And supposedly, the story goes, the commencement address was these five words: never, never, never give up. However, unfortunately, if you look on the internet, sometimes you find out that some of these things are stories that may not be true. I want to believe that this was true, and that Winston Churchill did give this a very brief, notable for its extraordinary meaning of the 5 words, never, never, never give up. Our gospel lesson is about a father who never, never, never gave up. There was a young man who wanted to make a major change in his life. He wanted to get away from his family, his hometown, and make a new life for himself in a very faraway place. Even if that meant burning the bridges behind him and losing his way, even if that meant ending up in a place he never imagined that he'd ever be. A university professor in Australia recruited 657 adults between the ages of 20 and 80 and asked them to discuss the 10 biggest decisions they had made in their life. If you were recruited for this study, what would you list as your 10 most significant life decisions so far? Well, the professor and his study subjects then sorted out the responses and the rankings of the decisions to how often certain decisions were mentioned, how significant the decisions were in the course of each person's life, and the emotions connected with the decisions. The professor in charge of the study reports the most enduring regrets in life result from decisions that move you further from the ideal person you want to be. We have all likely made decisions, no matter our age, that have moved us further from the ideal person we want to be. We've all made decisions that have moved us further from the ideal person God has made us to be. We are made in the image of God, purposefully. That's what sin is. Sin is moving away from God's character, God's purpose, and God's will. Romans chapter 3, verse 25 reads, "For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." This gospel is about a man, a son who rebels against his family. He asks for his share of the family inheritance before he goes, so he can go off to a distant country, start a new life, and have some real great fun. Well, the end result was he squandered his fortune in wild living, ending up broke and alone in a foreign land. When a severe famine spread throughout the whole country, the young man became very desperate and hired himself out to a pig farmer just to keep from starving to death. He strove to feed those pigs and even ate the pods that the pigs were eating. Feeding pigs was rock bottom, the very bottom, the most shameful job that a young Jewish man could ever have. The son had rejected his father. The son had lost his inheritance. The son brought shame on his family. And according to the tradition of the Hebrews, he was worthy of death. Every story Jesus tells as an introduction to the heart of God. You want to understand the nature of God, just look at who Jesus' audiences are. Jesus knew his crowd. He knew to whom he was speaking. He was careful to choose the right story for the right audience. This story begins with these words. Jesus saw his audience, and here they are. Among them, now the tax collectors, those dreaded tax collectors, and sinners were coming near to listen to him. Tax collectors and sinners were coming to Jesus to hear Jesus' words. And the Pharisees and the scribes, interestingly were grumbling. I like that word. They were grumbling. You can kind of imagine that, talking among themselves and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So Jesus tells them this parable. First, Jesus is telling his audience of outcasts, God welcomes you. You are important to me. You are a friend. And the Pharisees and scribes said, this man welcomes sinners. And not only welcomes them, but most importantly, he eats with them. Those are significant words. Not only do you he welcomes them, he actually breaks bread and drinks wine and has a meal with them. Paul Turnier is a Swiss psychiatrist and physician. He opened the field of pastoral counseling and was the author of several books on patient care. His writings were an important part of my own seminary training. He died rather recently, as time goes. In 1986 he died. Turnier believed in the unity of the person. The physical, emotional, and spiritual health were interconnected, all together. He focused on addressing the whole patient in his medical practice. His methods were very effective. Turnier wrote in one of his books, "It is a little embarrassing for students to come and study my techniques." I'd just like to have a side comment because his books are very readable. They're only about 75 pages long, so you can read a whole bunch of them. He understood the student, didn't he? He understood he understood his audience. Short books. And he said, it's a little embarrassing for students to come and study my techniques. They go away disappointed because all I do is accept people. There is healing and acceptance. Jesus noticed people whom others overlooked. Jesus touched people who were judged untouchable, the lepers and others. Jesus had no walls of acceptability around him. We build walls. We say who's in and who's out. We have all kinds of reasons for doing that. All are somewhat specious and not really significant. But Jesus' openness caused the local religious and political authorities to view him as being suspicious and held him in contempt, and actually was part of why they found him guilty and killed him. Even today, we struggle to accept and love people as they are. In 1989, Mother Teresa visited Phoenix, Arizona to open a homeless shelter. There was a huge celebration to welcome Mother Teresa. Crowds packed Veterans Memorial Coliseum to hear her speak. She was invited to do a radio interview on Phoenix's largest radio station, KTAR. Before the interview, the radio host asked Mother Teresa if there was anything he could do to help her work. He was accustomed to lending his celebrity status to various charities of those people who he interviewed on the air. But that's not what Mother Teresa wanted from him. Instead, she replied, yes, there is. Find somebody nobody else loves and love them. Find somebody nobody loves and love them. That's Jesus living his life also. Jesus loved people, all peoples, even those that nobody else loved. Come to me, all you that are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. John Baptiste, a biker, became a Christian while serving a short stint in prison. When he got out of prison, he couldn't find a church where he felt comfortable. So Baptiste started a church called Covenant Confirmers Ministries near Nashville, Tennessee. It's still there. Covenant's members include former addicts, gang members, prostitutes, and local police officers. Tommy Hollingsworth, a Covenant member who also spent time in prison, says of his church, "You don't have to clean up here. You just get connected to God. Everyone is welcome here. Get connected to God." That's first. Second, Jesus is telling his audience, God is waiting for you. That's amazing, isn't it? Who is waiting for us? Oh, our spouses or our friends or whoever it might be. But God is waiting for us. The son in the story is starving and desperate. He decides to head home and beg for mercy. He knew he had destroyed any chances of rejoining his family. He destroyed his chances for forgiveness, but he thought to himself, I'll confess my sin to my father, and I'll ask him to take me on as a hired servant. Then Jesus says in the parable, but while the son was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The father didn't wait for his errant son in the house kind of stubbornly, like an old man dad, and let him come to me. He stole everything. He wasted it on prostitutes. He used drugs. He had all kinds of problems. What on earth? Here he comes. I'm going to stand right here. Make him come to me. Well, the father who had been rejected, the father who had been shamed by his son's actions, the father was standing at the window waiting for his son to come home. He never gave up. The father didn't wait for his son to repent. He didn't wait for his son to say, I'm sorry, or apologize. While the son was still a long way off, the father ran to him, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. And then even more than that, we learned that he asked his servants to give him the best robe and put a ring on his finger and throw a party with the fatted calf. A 5-year-old boy had made a ceramic dish as a Christmas gift for his parents. As the boy arrived home the last day of school before Christmas, the wrapped gift slipped from his hands and fell crunch to the floor. The boy froze, then burst into tears. He had ruined his parents' very special handmade gift. The father tried to comfort the boy. Don't cry, son, don't cry. It doesn't make any difference. The mother lifted the boy into her arms. She held him close as tears ran down her cheeks too. When the boy finally calmed down, she picked up the gift and gently said, let's pick up the pieces and see what we can make out of them. Let's pick up the pieces and see what we can make out of them. God is waiting to welcome us home. Restore us, no matter how far we may have gone from God's character, God's will. God says to us through Jesus, let's pick up the pieces and see what we can make out of what is left. A moment of celebration. Jesus' story ends with some extraordinary words. The son said to him, remembering now the father ran out to meet his son, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." They began to celebrate. Put the best robe on him. Put a ring on his finger, which is the reality back in the family, and sandals on his feet. For the son of mine was dead and is alive again, lost and is found. Doesn't end there. And they began to celebrate. A teenage girl rebelled against her family and became increasingly estranged from them. One night, the daughter was arrested for drunk driving, and her mother had to pick her up from the local jail. That was one long, silent ride home. The daughter could only imagine all the angry words her mother must be holding inside as they drove home. The next day, the mother presented her daughter with a small gift, wrapped box. Inside was a rock. The daughter, as only children and teenagers sometimes can do, rolled her eyes. "Cute, Mom." "A rock." "What's it for?" "Read the card," her mother said. Inside was a card that read, "This rock is more than 200 million years old. That's how long it will take before I give up on you." God never, never, never gives up on us. We are accepted, we are loved, we are waited for, we are welcomed. Jesus' life, death, and resurrection show us that God gave everything for us, his only Son's life, to save us, to restore us, to bring us home to that heavenly glory where we shall be reunited with those we love and all the others. And interestingly enough, God is running to meet us with open arms. He has opened his heart, his life, his kingdom, there where we might live eternally with those we love and with those God gives us. Thanks be to God. Let us never, never, never give up on another, nor on ourselves. Amen.